everyone. It's Timmings here, Chair of the RNAO Governance Committee, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to join the webinar this afternoon and to give us your thoughts and insights and to ask any questions regarding some proposed dimensions of our governance overview and restructuring. So I'd like to begin then by just providing some background, which I think will give you some interesting context for the questions that I'm going to be proposing on. So the current structure of the Board of Directors has actually been in place for at least 4 decades, when RNAO back in that time had a very small staff and quite limited scope and capacity at home office. So in 2012, the Board of Directors decided to take a systematic look at governance, given the long time it had been since a review had taken place. And so a governance subcommittee was struck to examine the governance model, to look at the literature, to look at other like organizations to see what their governance structure was like, and then to bring forward to the board some considerations that would eventually go out to the membership for consultation. So the member-at-large positions on the board were originally created for the purpose of focusing on specific domains of practice. And like I said, there was much less capacity back in that time to actually do work in any of these domains of practice, and so the member-at-large positions were very busy back in 30, 40 years ago in terms of really working in those specific domains. Today, the association enjoys a staff of 90 full-time employees and has very robust capacity in all domains of both nursing and organizational performance. And so the organization has certainly evolved in the last 40 years. So the purpose of the consultation then is really threefold. One is to inform members not only of the process, but also to, as I say, solicit your feedback, to really get your thoughts and ideas and reactions to what is being proposed. And then finally, based on that, and we have been under a consultation since July, I believe, is when we undertook this process, so it has been going on for a few months now. So we want to gather feedback and then analyze that feedback, make the necessary amendments and changes to our ideas around governance structure, and then define motions that then would come forward at our next annual meeting, annual general meeting in 2016. And these motions would then be coming forward to you as members for one member, one vote. So just to be clear then, today is not about deciding on actual motion itself or anything like that. This is strictly a consultation, and the decision whether or not to accept a specific governance model and the corresponding bylaws that would make that a reality will be made by the members based on the outcome of one member, one vote. Okay, that will be in May 2016. So this just gives you a little look back at the consultations to date, and we have had a nice range of members and opinions participating in these one-hour webinars, and we're now at, I think, our second one. So thank you all, and we have been also receiving information, additional information after the webinars, and some people have not been able to participate in the webinar but have been going online and listening to the consultations that have taken place to date and then emailing in some of their thoughts. So it's been a really, really informative and rich process. So I want to now go in a fairly systematic way the major areas that are being the major areas that are being considered. I want to show you what the present state is in terms of current structure, what the proposed change is, some ideas around what the process could be for making those changes a reality. So the first, let's look at the first box in the upper left-hand corner. So currently on the board, we have 5 member-at-large positions that encompass the 5 major domains of expertise, and they're listed below: administration, education, nursing practice, nursing research, and socio-political affairs. As I expressed at the outset, the proposed change, given the capacity that now resides to do much of this work at home office, is really to look at incorporating the MAL domains of expertise into regional representative roles on the board. So there would still be representation in these major domains on the board, but it would be embedded in the regional representative roles, one possibility. And the process for making something like this happen, should this be the direction that the membership wants to go, is that we would define the criteria for regional representative role to include general, sort of broad nursing skills, as well as domain-specific skills that could be drawn from each of those 5 roles. And so, as I say, we would embed that into the regional representative role, and we would ensure that there would be a rotation from region to region at each election, so that we would always have, geographic diversity as well as the representation of the various domains. So it wouldn't always be that from the Northern Ontario it would always be administration, for example. We would ensure a nice matrixing of that. So that's one idea of how that could happen. The next area that would sort of result from that would be, as I mentioned, we currently have 5 MAL positions on the board, and what we'd look at would be actually removing those 5 from the board and incorporating them into the regional rep roles. But in order for this to happen in a seamless way without any major destabilization, we would look to continue with the regularly scheduled election for the 2016 MAL position, but it would just be a 1-year term as opposed to 2. So that would actually accommodate nicely the transition through that 1-year cycle. Okay? The next area under consideration is student representation. Currently, as you probably know, we do not have a student representative on the board of directors. And the proposal that came forward through the subcommittee, the governance subcommittee to the board, was that we consider the addition of a student representative. As you know, our students are the future of the profession, and so it was felt that this would be a very enriching addition to composition. And this would be decided through 1 member, 1 vote at our AGM. The next area would be the addition of a public representative on the board. Currently, we do not have a public representative, so when the subcommittee looked at other boards, like boards, and compositions on those boards, many boards, like our own, do have a public representative. Certainly with the commitment to patient and client-centered care and the voice of the patient, it was felt that bringing a public perspective to the board would be a useful addition. Once again, this would be decided at 1 member, through 1 member, 1 vote. Another area that was brought forward for consideration was related to the interest group chairs. We currently have one interest group chair representative on the board, and we have over 30 interest groups currently. And so you can imagine that's a fairly daunting task for one representative to bring forward, the highlights or the areas of work underway, and conversely, to be able to provide that connectivity to the various interest groups through their chairs from board. So it was felt that there would be definite benefit in adding an interest group chair relative to the board for a total of 2. And this, too, would be decided through one member, one vote. And the final area under consideration that is sort of in its own category, it doesn't have to do with representation, but rather has to do with the term limit of the board. Currently, we have a 2-year term limit on the board with the option of one renewal, so one renewal of another 2-year term. So the proposal is that we move to one 3-year term on the board. And the rationale behind this really related to the fact and experiences, as well as looking at other boards, that it often takes a year to sort of become familiar with the business of the board, governance, all the responsibilities that come with being a director on the board, and to really kind of find pride in that role. And that, you know, if you had a 3-year term, you would then have a solid 2 years to really put that expertise and knowledge and familiarity with your role to work as a member of the board. And so there was some thinking that having a 3-year term would be an opportunity to address that. It was also recognized that by the time you had spent 3 years on the board, that would be a fair commitment, a time commitment, and so there would not be a renewal of that 3-year term. So it would be essentially a move away from a 2-year term to a 3, but no option for renewal in the 3-year term. Now, in terms of the process for operationalizing a term change, this too would need to be thought through carefully, and one idea would be that this could be transitioned during the 2017 call for nominations. So, you know, we would want to ensure continuity between experienced members on the board and new people coming on and not wanting to disrupt the functioning of the board. So we could accomplish that if this were to be the membership wanted to go. This could transition during the 2017 call for nomination. Okay. So that basically encompasses the main kind of areas under consideration in this consultation. Now, because you're coming on towards the end of the consultations, what we have been doing is giving people the benefit of some feedback that we have received during the earlier phase of these consultations. By no means, it is just meant to give you a sense of what some of the questions have been, what some of the suggestions have been. And so in the interest of having time to hear from you, we're just giving you little things from that. This isn't a comprehensive analysis of all of that. But so here's what it looked like. So when it came to the suggestion of removing the MAL position, some people wondered and wanted an explanation again about sort of just some of the thinking behind that and what we hoped to achieve by actually removing the MAL positions. So once again, we reiterated that it was removing a designated position with just those domains of expertise as the only purpose of having that position, but it wouldn't completely come off. It would be really more integrated into the regional representative role. And once again, this relates to the fact that there is so much capacity at home office now. Others expressed concern with the loss of the socio-political affairs rep and some with the nursing education rep. And another concern, once again, back to the MAL role, that it might be too large a role to actually add to the regional rep, because regional reps are already, you know, for lots of chapters within their regions and so on, and have big regions. And so is this actually perhaps asking too much of the regional reps? So there are just some ideas and questions that came forward there. In terms of the student representative, I can tell you, there has been to date overwhelming support for the addition. And so that's been very, very well received. And so the question that has come up more often than not is just wanting to know, wanting to ensure that that student would be mentored by the board of directors, and so that student would really have optimal support to make their student contribution to the board of directors, but essentially overwhelming support for the addition of a student rep. In relation to the public representatives, once again, some members in the consultation wanted to understand more fully the purpose of adding a public representative to the board. This is an area that I can say, quite honestly, has been received with mixed response from those who have participated to date. Some very supportive of having that public representative view and perspective to enrich the deliberations of the board. Others expressing concern that this is a professional board, and so specifically what would the role of the public rep be, and also wanting to make sure that there could be safeguards put in place such that there wouldn't be a person coming forward with a special interest or any opportunity to be lobbying the board around any kind of special interest at all. And another expressed views that, obviously we would not want to make sure that there was no partisan activity that would be brought forward, and that should this be the direction that the membership chooses to go in through one member, one vote, that we would ensure that the public representative could come forward from any part of the province, not just Toronto. In terms of interest group chair representative, this too has been widely supported by the consultation to date. Tradition that the interest groups are doing really rich, important work out there in their various interest groups, and that it must be a daunting role for one board member to really be representing this at the board. And so not only was there support for the addition of a second interest group rep, but some even suggested maybe there should be consideration of even a third. The other ideas coming forward had to really do with the process of operationalizing this. So suggestions about how we might look at clustering the various interest groups, maybe around the complementarity of the work happening in interest groups, but essentially wanting to make sure that the division of labor across the interest group representatives would be somewhat balanced, and how that might happen through geography, or maybe the interest groups, once they're decided, that maybe they could choose clustering that they would have, and so on. So lots of different ways that could play out. Finally, in terms of term limits, I can honestly tell you as well that members to date are quite split around this. Some really like the idea of the 3-year term, with that thinking that you really would get a nice run to be able to make a substantial contribution at the board. Others very concerned that that's a long time to have to commit, and some liking the idea that you can go on for 2 years and that you actually would have a possibility of being able to stay on for a second 2-year term. But then recognizing that sometimes serving on a board for 4 solid years is also a long time to spend. So very mixed ideas on term limits. Other concerns or issues raised were wanting to know how any of this would affect the size of the board. And I can tell you, and we'll go through this in a minute, that there isn't a substantial change to the size of the board either way. So it's not like we'd be really, we have been very conscious of what the size of the board would be. So honestly, in one option there might be 21 members, in another option 19. So it doesn't vary substantially either way. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And another point raised, not so much a concern, but a point that was raised that wanting to ensure, given the changes with the nurse practitioner NPAO group having left and sort of gone out as their own organization, just wanting to be reassured that the board will continue to serve the needs of nurse practitioners, and of course, absolutely. We have many members who are nurse practitioners, and the board of directors will absolutely continue to serve the needs of nurse practitioners. Okay. So that's a little window in on some of what we've heard today. So you also have the benefit coming on to get a sense more fully of what some of these various options might look like, and up for your thoughts. So of course, it's always an option that we don't do anything. Whenever you go out for consultation, we may hear back, we like it the way it is. Even though it's 40 years old, maybe it's still serving us well, and we like it status quo. So that will either way be one of the options going out for one member, one vote, because you always have to give that as an option. The second option that will go forward could look like this. So, and once again, this option that we're calling option B would be an option that would be if all of what we have proposed in the course of the changes on that template that we just reviewed a few minutes ago, if all of that were be supported by the members, that's what it would look like. It would, the board have a president and president-elect, or in the even years, past president, and then it would include, as you can see on the screen, rep, a position of another interest group chair. The MAL roles would be deleted and incorporated into the regional representative roles. Yes, the regional representative roles. So I've spoken to those two all at once. And then there would be a change in the board of director term of office limit from 2 to 3 years with no renewal. And of course, currently it is 2 years. So that's what it could look like if all of the options discussed, or all of the proposed changes were supported by the members. Another option could look like this, that we're calling option C. And in this option, you'll notice a few subtle differences in this option. And you can imagine there could be endless options as we start to play with these. But in this option, the board would still, of course, president and president-elect, or in alternate years, even years. But in this option, we would look at the incorporation of a student representative. And there was some suggestion come forward that possibly we could look at the NSO chair as being the source of how the board would fill that particular position. So that's one possibility. And in this model, there would be the addition of a public representative. And one of the ideas was that in order for this representative to come on and meet the various criteria that would need to be in place to mitigate any of the concerns that were brought forward, it's possible that Patients Canada, in the Ottawa arm of Patients, or the Ontario arm of Patients Canada, could put forward a nomination or a possible candidate for this particular public representative role. In this option, we would look at not just adding one additional interest group chair, but we could play on the suggestion of adding 2 interest group chair representatives. So in this option, there would actually be 3. And to review, currently we just have 1. This would still look at deleting the MAL roles, but in this model, we would look at incorporating once again the domains of the MAL roles into the regional reps here. We would look at incorporating those into the 3 interest group roles. So we could look at, as an example, 2 of the MALs, for example, clinical, could go into the clinical practice. We could have 2 for clinical practice, could be incorporated into the interest group rep. You have 1 MAL interest group for the functional domains, such as administration, education, and research. But you could mix up in a variety of ways. You could have only 1 for clinical practice and then the other 2 for a combination of administration and others. So there's different ways to play with that, but we just wanted to give you a flavor of that. And in this, also, the term would change from 2 years to 3 with no renewal. So I think that gives you a nice overview of what is considered. So now what we want to do is open it up to see if, to get your views. We want to get your views and ideas on what these, take your questions and what some of these I've reviewed now. Okay? So what are your views on any one of the or the specific changes, or on options B and C? What thoughts on that?
Angela Cooper-Brathwaite here.
Hi, Angela.
How are you?
Good. You?
Good. I have 2 questions to ask before we get into the discussion. One is, option B, if all the regional reps would include skills from the MAL rules, why the need to rotate from region to region? And the other question is, current interest group rep term of office expires in May 2016. Would it be a 1-year term for the interest group rep and lead to the MLA rep?
Thank you, Angela. So back to your question around the regional representation and the integration of the MAL, and your question was why would we need to ensure that change? I think that was only an idea that had come forward, Angela. It may not be necessary. It would just be another way to ensure that there was a nice cross-provincial representation if we were to get into a situation where it appeared that we were always getting particular domains of expertise from one part of the province. That's all. It would only be a way of kind of doing that if it was necessary. In terms of your question or statement about the interest group term, you're quite right. That would happen the 2016 term rotation without being unduly disruptive. That's correct.
But here I have a couple of questions for you, Carol.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good.
I guess my concern is, the first concern I have is about the MAL roles, and I really do think that about disband those roles and be careful to incorporate them, because I do think that the regional reps have a lot on their plate as far as looking at their local issues and their chapter issues, and from the other roles, there's a lot of expertise in the role MALs bring. Somebody certainly who's in a faculty position at a university could represent both education and perhaps research, but especially for people who are strong researchers, not everyone's going to have that skill set that's going to have, the numbers behind them, the political savvy, the relationships with having funding from the big funders. And I think that's really key to have that level of representation at the board through some capacity, because further as we go, if the competition for those big grants is higher and higher, the competition's not easier, and we need to maintain a strong voice at those tables. And if we don't have people that are able to do that with that capacity, I think it's something we need to be aware of. So I would, be cautious around how those roles, if they are nominated, I really would like to see some strong criteria for how those categories are integrated into the board and they're not lost.
All right, thank you. Yes, that's I appreciate you. That is certainly a theme that has emerged, that by collapsing the two, it may just be too much, and also that we would lose, just as you've described, some of what's required in some of those specific domains, such as education and research, for example. Thank you for expressing that view.
Is the criteria around the president's role in terms of how that particular role is, given that position, I guess, in terms of length of term? I don't think in the past there's been anything that I've seen around the term, and other organizations, sometimes they do have a term for a president, so I'm just throwing that out there.
No, the actual term of the president, that didn't, it was, I believe, from the subcommittee view, it would be, as is now, you're a president-elect for a year, that it would be a 2-year term of president and then 1 year of past. So you're quite right. It was not changing in relation to the overall term of the board, given such a 4-year commitment as it is.
Yeah. What student role? A couple other questions about that too, which was one was the the level. Like, did people talk about the level of students? So I'm assuming this is with undergraduate student, and one people had discussion, whether this should be senior students, such as a 3rd or a 4th year, if it's a 4-year degree program, that kind of thing, and how what the process would look like as far as, so, we'll have to apply for the role, be nominated, those kinds of things.
Yes, thank you for that. We are actually in the process of consulting with the student group right now. One of the suggestions was that it be the chair. However, it is interesting in the process of the consultation right now, some feel that there should be criteria put in place, that it would be a senior year student, that it might be a little mini election with criteria from within the NSO group. So we are hearing back some interesting thoughts from that group about that.
And the comment around that student role, if it's a senior student, that person only would be in that position for 1 year and then off the board because he or she may no longer be a student.
And that has actually been recognized, that this particular term or this particular board of director position may have a little more turnover if, in fact, it was a 4th-year student. Yeah.
Yeah. We created a role for a student role description for nursing research interest group, and I know Marianne Cochran sent it out to all the chairs of the other interest groups. I don't know if it was helpful. I mean, we found that too with NRIG, is that you partway through the year and then you get a student on board and they are at that level, then they're gone the next year. You just sort of get them into it and then they're gone. So we created a bit more of a little bit more structure this year to see if that, give them suitable things to do, to see if that really, engages them more in terms of.
Well, we'll take a look at that. That's very helpful. Thank you so much. We're taking notes of all of these various questions, and this is why the consultations are so great. Thank you.
Is there people on the line, or just Angela and I?
So people, yes, we do have other people on the line, and people can either use, as you two have been, your telephone, and people are also welcome just to email in, as some are doing now. So we may just move now to some comments we're getting online. So we have a comment here. Did you want to read that, Sarah?
Is I prefer option B as the public rep, but maybe we can phase that in after a few years to reevaluate the impact of reducing the MALs.
Thank you for that comment. B and the of a public representative. All right. comments, questions, you're most to either, you can type your name in at the into the text box at the bottom right of the screen, and we're happy to you in the queue, or you're welcome just to, as people have done, just.
I have a comment around option C.
Angela?
The MAL
Yes.
Role that's going to be functional domain of admin, education, and research, and this is adding on to what Sue Ford said. It actually would be too demanding with numerous ex officio committees, so those interest groups, and the expertise that is required in education, administration, and research. Educator, somebody at a university of education and research, but administrative, or from a clinical setting, you might have administration, but education and research. So joining those three into one role for the interest group, I think that is really going to be extensive and very demanding. There might be some inequity in the roles if we had option B with putting so much of those high experiences in just one person. Because
thank you, Angela.
ways to the roles of the regional reps and the interest group stays the same. Always sit on 2 additional committees of the board. So the 2 additional committees of the board, you now have education, research, and admin, and there are certain committees that attach ex officio responsibilities as well.
Right.
And so one of my not so supporting option B.
All right. Option C. Or yes, C. Yeah. So it's both the combination of not being able to, the potential inequality and equity in the workload, but also the ability for anyone to actually be able to just represent all of those donors as well as the responsibility in the role. So that's coming up as a theme.
Question, what is the percentage of people on the MAL, I think with the MAL role that is from the GTA?
If I put that question, so what percentage of the, I'm assuming the inquiry is about the current board, what percentage of people fulfilling the MAL role now is from the GTA? Well, I'm going to have to think about that for a moment and go over the names of looking at that now. I know we have 2 from Northern Ontario. They're going to where actually are working in, who represent those 5 areas now.
One from outside.
Currently, let's just see. So we've got one. That's that person's from Quinte. So Quinte, Northern Ontario, GA, and GTA. So that's the way it's breaking down now. 3, 4, 5. So I'm actually not, so 2 of the 5 from the GTA, 1 from more Eastern Ontario, and 2 from Northern Ontario. To get, I think, I'm thinking when I was on the board as MAL admin, seems to be cross-provincial representation at that time too. So I'm sure it varies, right?
Another question that was typed in, this referring to the last question that was asked. This question implies the asker is concerned about regional representation. How does the new plan support regional representation?
really, that I think is a critical underpinning on our board, is to ensure that we do have representation that brings the various geographic perspectives, because as we know, issues manifest differently in large urban centers than from rural, remote, and every size of community in between. So there was definitely absolute that we've actually been asked a similar question in a slightly different way, and that is, when we looked at governance, was there any thought given to wiping the slate totally clean and reimagining or redesigning the regions and chapters, the boundaries in different ways? So that wasn't envisioned in this particular governance review, because it was felt by the governance committee at the time that seems to be working quite well, but there was certainly a reiteration that the work of the regional representative in terms of connecting with chapter presidents and so on was very important. And in fact, the domains of expertise from the MAL may also be a way, interestingly enough, for them to connect more deeply around some of those specific domains that they might carry as a regional representative, that they might carry responsibility for on the board. So it was actually recognizing the importance of regional representatives, and I think wanting to leverage that. Our suggestions about something that might add more support to regional representation, we're happy to hear that, but I think more than anything, this is acknowledging the criticality of that role, very critical roles on the board structure.
Regional rep, when a chapter loses its leadership and even fall apart, is the regional rep who helps to revive that chapter. And where
yeah, we're seeing that happening, or has happened.
In Durham, since I'm a member of our RNAO, not recently, but it has been. The region had to come back and take the position to reestablish that group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Responsibility is great. They carry a large geographic area as well. And yes, adding these expertise into the role might help to not only crystallize it, but you need people who are applying for these positions need aware. Heavy.
In some cases, too, I think just to flip that around a little bit, the other thing might be, it might be daunting for some people. If we, let's say, just one example, let's say, okay, we're going to rotate those roles, the MAL roles, and so Region 4, that's my region, but just for example, let's say we say Region 4 is, this year, Region 4 this term, the Region 4 person has to take on MAL research. Well, what if that scares people away, because the people who be the regional rep are not researchers in their career, and they don't want to take that on.
Right.
That's another way to think about it.
That's true. So that would be why, back to an earlier question, that would be the very line of thinking that would be following why particular MAL roles couldn't necessarily always rest with the same region, right? Would want to mix that up, but even then, what you described could come into play, even if you rotated it the next time and it was administration. Well, a person who really wanted to put their name forward for regional rep, that may not be their expertise. So articulated the part that would really have to be nuanced there, for sure.
And I think people are, some are running in roles, they're in a completely different, it's like a new leadership capacity for them, right? Not every regional rep is a nursing leadership title in their employment setting. So again, what is it we're trying to do in terms of the overall association and the board in those positions, because sometimes it's hard enough to get somebody to run for a position, and get an executive for a chapter, let alone things that might say, forget it, I'm not doing that.
Exactly. No, I think your points are all very, very valid, and thank you. We're noting all of these. There's a comment on the screen. I'll have Sarah read that.
So this is a comment on the nursing student position. This member feels the individual should be in fourth year, demonstrating their vested interest in the nursing field. Once they're graduated, they're still not fully experienced, and the new grad would still be a newbie, is the member.
Okay, so if I'm interpreting this correctly, then it would be that the nursing student could fulfill a 2-year term, with the first year being truly a student and the second year being a new grad / student, but now transitioning into the workforce. Thank you for that thought. Now I don't see there's anything else in the queue, is there? So can we talk a little bit? I'd love your thoughts on the other idea. We've talked a fair bit about if MAL roles are to be incorporated at all. We've heard a fair bit about the concerns around that being embedded in a regional rep role, right? Just the challenges of that. In option C, which is on the screen, this is a variation whereby if the MAL roles, those domains of nursing practice, were to be split among 3 people, and these 3 people would actually be interest group representatives as opposed to regional representatives. So in a scenario where you're an interest group rep on the board, chances are you'd be one of 3, so you'd have about 10 interest groups, unlike the 30 that, for example, Ann Cochrane has now. So you'd have 10, but in addition to that, you would have an MAL domain, 1 or 2 that you might be responsible for. Any thoughts on that model? Trying to put these out there in various scenarios is that at the end of the day, what we're going to need to do is to be able to take some options out with the corresponding bylaw changes, because this is about bylaw change, right? So we're going to need to be able to develop bylaws that speak to these in a way that, as members, when you go to vote, we're able to distill or disentangle those areas that members are going to really want to vote on in terms of these various options. So what do you think of this one in terms of...
Is Angela here? Looking at option C,
yes.
I think with one person having, and I mentioned that before, administration, education, and research, it would say there are 3 interest group representatives, and we're going to take administration, 1 education, 1 research, and everybody has a bit of political activity embedded in the role, because of many
yes.
the nurses do in in chapters.
Yes.
I think it's easy to spread it around to all the roles for the interest group rep, and then specifically we need that additional skill and expertise like research, education, admin to put them in, separate them out. If you put those 3 together, I think you're going to get somebody with,
right.
Likely to get somebody with all those 3.
All those. So to make sure that they are kind of strategically balanced as
yes.
to what we just put up as an example on the screen.
Yes.
Thank you, Angela. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Others? Right? Okay. So any in the queue? No?
Not really.
Okay. So now we can move on. What else? So not related to specific options. So are there any other questions at all?
So this is a comment that was typed in. I don't feel the student vote should be the determining factor for the outcome changes. But this is in regards to the student rep position and the consultations with the students.
So, essentially, the NSO group are being just consulted for their ideas, stakeholder group in terms of their thinking around this and so on. But absolutely, the decision point, like the consultation point, will be through one member, one vote. You know that students do not vote, so they wouldn't be actually determining the final decision. There is one vote for NSO as a group, but each individual student, of course, does not get to vote. So, for that point, I hope I've clarified that the consultation or survey that's going on right now is simply to get that perspective put in the mix.
For the term, I'm in favor of the original model, as 4 years could possibly be covered. If the individual starts the position and then after being in changes their mind, will be locked in for 3 years.
All right. Thank you. So essentially, reiterating the term, the two-term with the opportunity to come off at 2 years or renew another 2. The 3-year term would, it sounds like, there could be some after 2 years if they change their mind or whatever, they would feel over year 3 and so on. So at that point, consideration. I can honestly tell you, have been so helpful. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
This member who just submitted that comment just wanted to add that a term for 3 years, a lot can happen in one's life. So I think they're implying that those changes might become a factor as well.
Yes. Thank you very much. That's, we have heard that as well, that 3 years is a lot to commit, and life happens, right? And so by having a 3-year term, as much as there could be an upside for continuity, right, and that first year getting your feet wet and the next 2 really feeling your role, that in fact a lot happened in 3 years. So very thank you for that. We're hearing a mixture of response as well. So thank you for that. I think that's it for the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody on the screen? Thank you on the line. We're just done. Oh, hello.
Oh, the wrong teleconference?
Hi. Well, you may be. We're just about to draw to conclusion the governance consultation.
Oh, and I am in the wrong one, but I am using the same number because Josephine gave it to me, so I will wait.
Well, we're just about to wrap up. Nice to hear your voice anyway.
Thank you.
I want to, first of all, thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules today. You've given us some really important and good thoughts for reflection to take back to the subcommittee and the board. There will be, I would encourage you that if upon reflection, I know that this is a lot to take in an hour and to wrap your head around some of the governance considerations. So if after the call you have a moment when you think, oh, I wish I said such and such, by all means, please email Josie her email is going to come up here in a minute. Email Sarah, not Josephine. By all means, please email her, and we will ensure that it will go into the rich information we've been gathering. I would also ask that you encourage your member colleagues to join for our final webinar, which is coming up this Wednesday evening, 6 to 7. And if people can't take the time and can only email in, we really welcome the members' ideas and thoughts. And you can, all of the previous consultations are posted on our website at MyRNAO, and by all means they can go in and get a real feel for how the consultations have taken place and then give us their thoughts as well. So thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Take care. Bye.